Recognized in the rear of the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, today I rise in support of ACA 5. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy signed the first executive order on affirmative action to ensure that Americans are treated fairly when it comes to race, color, or national origin. The vision to reverse the legacy of past racism and the impact of ongoing discrimination. And I think we can all agree that it's an understatement to say that that vision was never achieved. Decades after his assassination and the assassination of civil rights leaders, racism and discrimination and their impact on inequality and poverty continue to this day. Decades after the first marches for civil rights, our communities are marching in the streets today to end those same wrongs. Now, I know there's a lot that's going to be said on this topic today, so I'm going to focus on the conversation in my ethnic community, as relayed in some of the 11,000 emails I've received on this topic. Some of the opposition want you to believe that Asian Americans unilaterally oppose affirmative action. That is simply not true. Over 100 organizations and community leaders representing hundreds of thousands of Asian Americans support this measure. Surveys show a majority of our communities support this measure, and why? They know that when Proposition 209 is lifted, Asian Americans will receive more equal opportunities to advance. In contracting, the data shows that Asian American businesses win more contracts in cities with affirmative action like Atlanta or Chicago than in my city of San Francisco with the oldest Asian community in the country. In public employment, I hear all the time that my Asian American constituents want more teachers who look like us, more principals, university presidents, more first responders, firefighters, bilingual police officers. Current law prevents that. And finally, some facts about education. Fact: universities that practice affirmative action have seen greater gains in Asian American enrollment than schools that don't. Fact: Asian admission rates to the UCs, including the great schools of Berkeley and UCLA, have actually gone down since the Prop 209 ban on affirmative action. And one more fact: if ACA 5 passes, the United States Supreme Court has already ruled that affirmative action cannot be used to set quotas. I also want to say something about my own personal history. I would not be standing here on this floor as the first Asian American to represent Eastern San Francisco but for affirmative action. When I was 19, I was admitted to a program to encourage minority students to consider careers in public policy. I wouldn't have gotten a fellowship to go to a public policy school at Harvard or put on the path to be where I am today. And as our colleague from San Diego said, so many of us would not be here today but for these programs. Let me end by pointing out one thing about today's vote. Today's vote is not going to do away with Prop 209. Today's vote simply gives Californians the opportunity to make that decision, a quarter century after Prop 209, when we should allow a new generation of voters to decide whether we are doing enough to address disparities. Voters should be able to decide if California should run STEM camps for girls and not have it banned because it considers gender. Voters should be able to decide if a police review board should consider the racial background of its applicants and not have it banned for considering race. Voters should be able to decide if we can have programs to increase the number of Latinx doctors to address enormous health disparities. And voters should decide if Asian-owned businesses decimated by COVID racism should get some assistance. If this measure is passed by voters, it simply lifts a ban. But what will happen after November is that the public, local state governments, school districts, police accountability boards can go to the public and can work on new solutions to make our state a true state of opportunity. In closing, let me also admit that I had some initial misgivings about whether this was the right time to move on this measure, because this is a tough conversation. But let me say, if not now, then when? If not us, then who? The time is always right to do what is right. It's time to do the right thing. I ask you to support ACA 5.